This is the only deadlift tutorial that you'll ever need. I'm gonna start with two of our favorite deadlift patterns. One to shift the heaviest load, and the other to build the most muscle. Shifting the heaviest load is a conventional deadlift. It does build muscle, but a lot of that times, our goal is to build specific muscle, and a conventional deadlift isn't very specific. We're using so much of our body to shift the heaviest weights possible. Whereas if your goal is to build specific muscles, most people will use a deadlift to build glutes and hamstrings. And if that's the case, the best variation is a Romanian deadlift. And I'm gonna show you the difference between the two right now. Now, before we start with the deadlift tutorial, I'm gonna show you our essential pieces of equipment, starting with the footwear. And that is no footwear at all. The reason why I prefer no footwear is two reasons. One is because the thicker the sole, the more you need to travel for your deadlifts. And that just makes the movement more difficult unnecessarily. Number two, shoes like this has extra spongy soles, which the analogy that I use is like standing on a bed mattress when you're trying to lift a heavy weight. It's not very stable. So the smaller the sole, the stabler the surface. The next piece of equipment that I like is a covering for the shins. So that's either long socks, a knee sleeve, or we have these special shin protectors, which allows you to do a lot of great things with the deadlift. Number one is using our strong lats, which increases the rigidity of our torso. Our lats attach at the front of the humerus or the front of this upper arm bone and come underneath and attach to the top of the pelvis. So they cover the longest distance of our spine of all of our core muscles. So whenever we're loading our spine, we want to have our lats on. And to do this, we need to be pulling the bar into our body from start to finish. And if you do that without the shin pads, you're probably going to bleed on my barbells, which I don't want, or it's going to bruise your shins, which you don't want. So the shin pads are going to allow you to use your lats, and it's going to allow you to keep that bar as close to your center of mass as possible, allowing you to shift the heaviest weights possible. The conventional deadlift is my favorite exercise to teach someone how to bend. So although I'm going to show you the Romanian deadlift, that's actually a little bit harder in my opinion. Now let's have a look at the stance in a deadlift, and this is going to be different from lifter to lifter. One thing that we need to factor in when we think about the stance is the position of our arms that's going to be the most efficient. The most efficient is where our arms are straight down. If you go any wider than straight down, you need to travel further and further. So we need to have our arms straight down, but our hips need to fall on the inside of that, and the hips take priority. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because everybody's different. Now, if you have a look at my proportions next to Dinny's, they're slightly different. I've got more masculine proportions, which is slightly broader shoulders relative to the hip width. So it's very easy for me to have my arms straight down and for my hips to fall on the inside of that. However, Dinny has very feminine proportions. So her shoulders are a little bit narrower proportionately to her hips, which are a little bit wider. So therefore, when she reaches straight down, her arms need to fall on the outside of her legs, giving her hips room to move, which means her arms aren't going to be straight down, but they're as close to that as possible, which is fine. I like to walk up to the bar in your comfortable stance, which is roughly hip width. Have a look at the shins. They're about an inch away from the barbell, but the main part that we're looking at is the barbell is in line with the center of her base of support, or in other words, her midfoot. So what happens now is when she bends over to grab that barbell, she's going to squat into position and her shins are going to gently move forward and very, very gently touch that barbell. We don't want to push that barbell forward. From here, she wants to reach her arms downwards and pull the bar into her body. Sitting into position, her lats are on. So pulling the bar into her body or thinking about pulling her armpits towards the pelvis is the best cue to contract your lats. Reaching the crown of her head to the ceiling will lengthen her spine and help take the slack out of the bar. Taking a big breath to brace and thinking about pushing the world away. Locking the knees out, pushing the hips through in that order. The knees lock out before the hips push through. Now that we've factored in her stance and her grip width, the next thing I want you to think about with the arms is reaching down. One common problem that people make is trying to pick it up with their arms. We don't want to do that. We want to act like the arm is just a piece of rope that attaches the shoulder to that barbell. And what we want to do is reach down and back. Doing this movement is going to do two things. It's going to make our arms as long as possible, And the next thing it does is it's going to protect our biceps from tearing when you get strong enough for that to happen. One of the most common things that we see with bicep tears is people gripping as hard as possible and bending their elbows using the biceps to do that. And the hips and back are a lot stronger than the biceps. So the weakest link in that chain is the biceps, and that is how biceps tear. So if you want your biceps to not tear, reach down and relax that elbow joint. Now I'm going to show you some of my favorite cues to put her upper body in the perfect position for the deadlift. And that is, when she bends down into position, she's going to think about reaching down as far as possible. Grabbing that barbell, she pulls back into her body, and then with her head, she reaches the crown of the head to the ceiling. Doing these 3 cues is my favorite way to help take the slack out of the bar. Let's have a look at that in real time. Reaching down to grab the bar, pulling the bar into her body, sitting into position, head to ceiling, big breath to brace, pushing the world away. Sits into position, pulls the bar into the body, elbows nice and relaxed, and arms nice and long. We all love a deadlift, and the objective of the deadlift most times is to lift as heavy as weight as possible, as well as to teach someone the bend pattern. Both of these things are very important. However, we can't really pinpoint exactly which muscles we're using. I'm trying to get her to use her whole body to shift the heaviest load possible, which means it's probably not the greatest choice of exercise if you are a bodybuilder or if you just want to specifically build glutes, hamstrings, or any specific muscle. That's where the Romanian deadlift comes in handy. Now let's have a look at the Romanian deadlift. Dini starts the Romanian deadlift the exact same way as a conventional deadlift. Same stance, same setup, sitting into position, bending the knees like a conventional deadlift, but now the Romanian deadlift starts at the top. Initiates the movement by looking down, hinging at the hips, minimizing the knee bend, maximizing the stretch that she feels on the hamstring. So we're using less quadriceps and more of those muscles of the posterior chain. When we don't bend the knees as much, this allows a greater emphasis on the posterior chain muscles, which is the hamstrings, the glutes, and the erector spinae muscles. This is why the Romanian deadlift is a better choice for developing hamstrings and glutes than the conventional deadlift. The next biggest difference between the 2 exercises is the Romanian deadlift places more focus on the down portion of the lift. When we started with the conventional, we picked it up and we didn't really place any emphasis on the down phase, but now we do. So the first rep of a Romanian deadlift, we like to start from the ground, and I pick it up with the same technique as a conventional deadlift. Grabbing the bar, sitting into position, pushing the world away. Now, this is where the Romanian deadlift starts. Which one is better or worse? In my opinion, they both complement each other so much, and you can and should use both of these exercise variations at different stages of your training journey. Do you perform deadlifts on leg day or on back day? What are you trying to achieve? You're trying to shift the heaviest weights possible? I would say do it on deadlift day. But if your goal is to train a specific group of muscles, you need to figure out what exercise is going to target that muscles. Now, people think of deadlifts, they think of glutes and hamstrings. Well, conventional deadlift isn't great at doing that, but a Romanian deadlift is. If you found this advice useful, and if you want to keep getting stronger and keep looking better, click subscribe for more.